One of the biggest reasons why your performance in Call of Duty might be suffering as a controller player and why your aim assist might not feel like it's actually working is because you might not really be running the right settings for your system and your controller, which actually actively harms the way you play this game and may make you feel like the aim assist isn't really working. So for context, I've been a keyboard and mouse player in Call of Duty for a long time, and up until recently I've been playing exclusively like that, but I decided to give controller a go, and I recently discussed which one I prefer and why in a different video, but I've been sort of needing to use controller more because it's not as rough on my wrist as KBM is, and I found that changing a few settings can actually make a world of a difference in this game. So if you're struggling with controller, take it from me as somebody that's been on KBM for so long, these settings will for sure help your performance out a lot, and with some good practice, you'll be amazing in Call of Duty in no time with your controller. But before I talk about my settings for a controller, be sure to subscribe with notifications set to all so you can stay up to date with all the latest videos. Alright, let's just get right into it. I personally use a PlayStation 5 DualSense controller. I've also tried Xbox controllers before, but I just found that the PS5 controller was more comfortable and just felt more natural in my hands. But honestly, these settings should work no matter what you're doing for your controller. If you do have paddles on your controller, that's even better for movement mapping, but if you don't have paddles on your controller, it doesn't matter, these settings should work either way. I do find though that the PlayStation 5 controllers in general just had a more comfortable setup for my hands. I know a lot of people do like though Xbox controllers for ergonomics. It's 1000% up to you, and also depending on what console you mostly play on. So the first menu we're going to take a look at is just the controller menu. Down here we want to scroll to inputs. Under inputs you're going to see the first bar being button layout. Now yours is likely set to default, but I personally don't use the default button layout, so I do hold it in a standard way. But what I personally do is I use the tactical layout, because the R3 on my controller becomes the slide and dive button, and melee becomes the circle or B if you're on an Xbox controller. This just felt more natural to me, and I personally preferred this layout. You can try the other ones, like I think it's bumper jumper or whatever, but you know, I think tactical is sort of the best option of the layout options in Call of Duty. So the stick layout preset is default for me. I didn't really want to mess with this setting much. Going from there, you can see the horizontal and vertical stick sensitivity. Now I just want to briefly explain what these do. Basically, you're setting how much the movement of the stick affects your aim in the game as you're playing. This is for both horizontal and vertical, and I personally find it to be the best on 1.5. So compared to the old sensitivity numbers, that's between like a 6 and a 7, I found somehow that this was the sweet spot for me, so I liked 1.5. I think that any more or any less isn't really the best when you're applying it in the game. You can of course go up or down. I just found like 1.5 was the best. There's some settings here that I personally skipped, like simplified controls and low motor strain presets. If you want to take a look at those, you can, but I will warn you, like, don't mess with these unless you like for sure want to use them, because they will ruin some of the other settings you've put in, and that's just going to take a lot of time for you to go back and fix. Alright, for controller vibration, most people would set this one to off. I didn't really notice a difference between setting it on or off for my performance. If you find that it is affecting your performance to have the vibration on, just turn it off. You don't need the controller to be shaking around. If you do like, you know, the way it feels when it's, because somehow vibration, in my opinion, it makes the controller feel a little more like heavy. I don't really know how to explain it, just feels more weighted compared to when I turned it off. It felt quite lightweight. So totally depends on your preferences. You can set this to on or off. I don't really think that it does affect it too much. But in any case, for trigger effect, I'd skip that. You don't need this in a competitive multiplayer game. And then the important ones we want to look at here are dead zone inputs. So dead zones are basically areas in the sticks on the controller, and whatever you set for your dead zone is going to affect how far you need to push the stick in any direction in order for it to actually register a response in the game. So in my case, I found the best settings for the dead zones to be the following. For the left stick minimum, you want that at 15. Left stick max is at 99, so not precisely 100, but any lower than that, and I didn't really feel like that was good for my performance. For the right stick minimum, we're going to go for 15 again. Right stick max is also 99, so it's basically the same thing as the left. Now for the left trigger and the right trigger, we've got 13 for each, so it's not going to require so much force from your finger to press the trigger in order to get your shots out in the game. So that's why I found 13 was just the best for my controller and my gameplay. Alright, so now we're going to go over to the aiming tab. Down here we've got the sensitivity multiplier. For these settings here, it's a 1.00 for everything except for ADS sense, which is going to be 0.70. I found that this was just the best combination. It just worked for me. Now we're going to go down to aiming advanced settings, and this is a pretty important one here. So the first thing we can see is ADS sensitivity transition timing. This is basically a setting that lets you choose at which moment the aim sensitivity is going to change when transitioning from hipfire to ADS. So instant is when it's immediately applied, and the gradual is when it's progressively applied when alternating between the two. After zoom is when it's applied only when you're fully zoomed in. You can pick whichever one of these three that you want. want. I would say avoid after zoom unless for some reason that's something that works for you. But for the most part, what you want to do is either pick between instant or gradual. In my case, I chose gradual because I felt like that just worked the best. It definitely helps a lot more with getting headshots if you are on controller. I just felt like gradual made the most sense in the gameplay in Black Ops 6, but instant is typically the default that's been present in previous Call of Duty titles, so if you feel more comfortable with instant, you can use that just as well, but for me, gradual just was the best. For the aim response curve, you want to select dynamic or linear. These are the best two in my opinion. Standard is fine, I don't necessarily prefer it. I'd say if you're using standard, try to at least get used to linear. I do find linear to be just better. Dynamic is great as well, though for me, I did pick linear. I felt like that was just the smoothest. It had the best solution for aiming compared to dynamic. It's a good cross between standard and dynamic, and it feels a bit smoother and requires a bit less work on your part when it comes to fine-tuning the aiming so much in the game, but yeah, I just preferred linear because it was just smoother. Now, since we've adjusted those things, we also want to adjust the custom sensitivity per zoom. For this set of settings, you want to turn it on and then show more, and from here, you want to set these to something between 0.8, 0.9, something like that. You can go lower. I wouldn't recommend going higher though than 1. This is going to help you a lot because this helps with magnification. The sensitivity of your stick matters when you're in ADS because when you're using stuff like a sniper rifle, too much sensitivity can throw your aim off, so you don't want to do that. Instead, just pick kind of a lower-ish number. Personally, 0.9 felt like it was just the best for me. It had the most response to my controller and gameplay style, and I think that it's a much better option. You can go a bit lower, say 0.8. I tried 0.8 as well, and I thought it was really solid, but 0.9 was just better by like a slim margin. Back to the main tab, do not turn aim assist off. You're going to need that. The rest should be fine. All right, so for movement, if you've ever wondered how some of those players you see in clips just seem to be like auto sprinting all the time, you want to turn on sprint assist. Now, there are a few options under sprint assist. There is standard and there is tactical sprint assist. So sprint assist being on just means that it's like a standard sprint. You can go into tac sprint. Tac sprint assist being on means you're automatically going into tac sprint. So that's how it looks in those clips when you see players moving in that way in some of those movement clips or whatever. And if you want to replicate that, you're going to want to turn on tac sprint assist. Some people don't like this setting being on. Personally, I automatically always just kind of go into a sprint. So I feel like this is just sort of the best if you've got more of like a faster play style. If you don't have a faster play style, maybe you don't want to mess with this. But in my experience, tac sprint assist being on just kind of helped me out the most. But yeah, as you can see in this clip here, you can see how that looks when you just do like short bursts of movement. That's really how those players online do it. I didn't turn mantle assist, crouch assist, those things on. They're not really important to use. You don't want to necessarily get those things done without your input, as they can be irritating if you don't intend to move when it got you to move. Corner slice, just keep it on. It's a visual thing. It doesn't really change anything. I don't really see why you would turn it off. For slide and dive behavior, I personally think that you should turn on hybrid. So you can tap to slide and hold to dive, those sorts of things, but hybrid is one that I found was the best for movement. Basically with hybrid, you tap only to slide, and then to dive, you have to tap while you're holding the sprint input. So this might make your Omni movement not as smooth, but gameplay wise, this just tends to be better for your settings. C is hybrid. This is a personal choice at the end of the day. I just liked hybrid the most. The rest of this page isn't really anything that you want to deal with. So we're going to go over to the combat menu real quick. This is like personal gameplay preference stuff, but these might help you. If you notice, sometimes doing the finishing move is going to set you into the body shield situation, and if you don't want to use the body shield feature, you can toggle this so that you can only initiate a finishing move instead. So there's so many times where I've gone to use a finisher and I'll end up just accidentally doing the body shield thing, and it really annoys me because I just wanted to get a finisher in. So I toggled this to finishing move only. You'll press and hold to initiate a finishing move and not accidentally initiate body shield. This is just a personal thing that I felt like was important to mention. I never really found myself using body shield. I know some people do. I didn't care for it, honestly. Like, I don't know, it's kind of funny, I guess, but I just didn't care for it. For melee as well, you can either add it to the weapon cycle, or you can just press and hold the melee button to get your knife or bat or whatever out. I personally do prefer to press and hold. I don't want to have to cycle through an extra weapon when I'm just trying to switch back and forth between my main weapon and my pistol. But if you think you're going to benefit more from having it in the weapon cycle, you can do that. I don't recommend it though. All right, if you want to maximize your controller's ability as well, besides just the general controller settings, this is kind of a small little tweak you can do in the game that can actually really help you, and that is to change the color of your crosshair. So this might seem like a very small change, but it's kind of funny how much this can actually do. So what you want to do is you want to go to the gameplay HUD settings, and from there you want to scroll down to crosshair. You can change the color there. There you can change the crosshair setting to on, and then select the color that you want. The color you pick should be something more bright and noticeable. So you want to pick colors like blue or cyan, red, green, and so on and so forth. Assist. This makes it more visually noticeable and allows for your shots to feel more lined up than just plain white crosshairs. Me personally, I go for cyan, but you can also do green. I know some people like that one as well. Red, I don't really recommend it just because like the icon over the enemies' heads are typically default set to red unless you've changed those yourself to something else. For visibility as well, you can actually change the name that appears above a player's head to either the full name, the abbreviated name, or just an icon, which is like a dot. If you want to see the full name, you certainly can. I do personally feel like it creates too much clutter on the screen, so the icon just tends to be the best for my personal gameplay style, but feel free to change this to whatever you want depending on your preferences in Black Ops 6. Graphics settings are also important for performance, and I wanted to mention this because I did at the beginning of the video say that the system settings can actually impact your performance as well. So it's not only about controllers, but it's also about optimizing your view. So this totally depends on your setting, whether it be PC or console. I'm running this game on a PC, so my graphics settings are going to look different compared to yours if you are on a PlayStation or an Xbox. If you're on PC and your GPU supports it, I recommend throwing NVIDIA DLSS on and use frame generation. Even if you do have a good GPU that can run a lot of frames, I do recommend using DLSS anyways just to boost that frame rate. It doesn't really harm your game, so from what I found, it actually was helpful, so I do that. I've also got mine set to the maximum refresh rate possible, and you want to ensure that your frames are unlimited if your system is stable enough so that you're not locked in a certain frame rate specifically. This I found was the best just from a visual standpoint, though you want to prioritize frame rate. Don't worry about it looking like super ultra realistic or whatever. That's not why we're playing Call of Duty anyways. If you want to do it for the campaign, go ahead, but like other than that, in a multiplayer setting, don't prioritize visuals. Prioritize visuals in a game like a single player game where it's supposed to be prioritized, but here, make sure you get your settings to a point where you get the best FPS if you're on PC. On console, try to make sure that you have yours set to the max refresh rate that you can. So if you're on the PS5, PS5 Pro, Series X, Series S, whatever, set it to the max refresh rate that you can, depending on, of course, the screen that you're using, whether it be a TV or a monitor or whatever. The more you can do, the better with console. There's not really a lot of like graphic settings that you got to mess with on console. Maybe you got to do like performance, balance, quality. I'm not 1000% sure how it is on console. I haven't played Call of Duty on console in some time, but whatever you can do to boost your frame rate, that's what you want to do. You also want to turn off motion blur across the board for the world, the weapon. Don't keep it on. You don't need it. It doesn't help you. I don't think that motion blur has actually added anything to the game other than like visual clutter. I know it's there for like realism purposes or whatever, but in my opinion, it just looks bad and it doesn't help with your performance. For the most part, these are the best settings that I think can help your controller performance as well as improve the visuals so that your controller performance is the best that it can possibly be. At the end of the day, these things are ultimately your decision, but I think that these settings happen to be the best, and I found that they did the best for me in the games that I played so far in Black Ops 6. I found that these worked for zombies as well, so if you're mostly a zombies player, you should be fine with these settings too. In both multiplayer and zombies, you should be good to go. Alright, I'll wrap things up there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications set to all so you don't miss out on a single video. Share this video and comment below what you think of these settings and if there's any changes that you made to help your gameplay out more. And that's all for today, folks.